So I have been getting a lot of comments on my recent video, Lean Bulking 101. In case you guys haven't seen that, well, why not? There it is. But there have been a lot of comments regarding my recommendations for a somewhat lower or decreased fat intake for the purposes of staying lean throughout a lean bulk, such as... Oh, sorry. How'd that get in there? This stems from the notion that a decreased intake of fat is going to impair or inhibit your body's ability to synthesize testosterone. For those of you guys that don't know, testosterone is the main androgenic anabolic hormone produced in men, and about 1/8 or 1/10 as much produced in women. But testosterone is responsible for making you bigger, stronger, faster, healthier up until a certain level. Obviously, if you start experimenting with, too much testosterone, aka steroids, there are negative health repercussions. Happier overall, it is awesome. Testosterone is the ultimate man formula. It's like man juice in a bottle.
Oh, that sounds terrible. Why did I say that?
Now, our body can synthesize an array of compounds. For example, our very muscle fibers are created using muscle protein synthesis, which uses ingested amino acids from our diet, similar with testosterone. Although we can synthesize it, the actual building blocks have to come from somewhere else. They come from cholesterol, which comes from dietary fat. So when you think about it, lower fat, lower testosterone, higher fat, higher...
Twelve seconds later.
Alright guys, that being said, I do understand the logic behind it. Fat makes test, low fat, low test, low gains. But is that actually what the science says? Let's dive into it. Question number 1. Does a decreased fat intake inhibit your body's ability to synthesize testosterone and thus inhibit your body's ability to build muscle or lose body fat? There actually was a study done on exactly this topic. It was called Diet and Serum Sex Hormones, testosterone being a sex hormone, in healthy men, published in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry. So what these guys did is they took 30, average, healthy, not too old, not too young men, and then they made them eat through 6 weeks of a diet with high fat intake. We're talking 40% of their calories were coming from fat, and then they made them switch to a diet with moderately lower fat intakes. 25% of their calories were coming from fat. If you guys want real world examples, this would be like a person eating about 2,500 calories to go from 40% of his calories coming from fat, aka 110 grams of fat, down to 25%, aka 70 grams of fat. So we're talking a reduction of 40 grams of fat down to 60% of what they were doing before. It's a pretty sizable reduction. What they found was that free testosterone levels decreased from 22.7 to 19.3 nanomoles per liter. This was because of a decreased fat intake in addition to a decreased saturated fat intake. Remember, there are different kinds of fat. We've got saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, trans fats, good fats, bad fats. But in this case, it was a combination of overall fat and specifically saturated fat reduction, which seemed to have caused this decrease in testosterone to a significant and noticeable, tangible level. What's that? You guys want more? Well, you got it. Another study called Testosterone and Cortisol Relationships to Dietary Nutrients and Resistance Exercise. It found a positive correlation between both overall fat intake and testosterone, and another positive correlation between saturated fat intake and testosterone. Positive correlation meaning that there are two variables which move up together, they move down together. An example of this would be the number of times I ask you guys to like this video and the actual number of likes I get on this video. So as you guys can tell from the evidence, in the question of does a decreased fat intake and thus decreased saturated fat intake cause a decrease in your body's ability to synthesize testosterone? The answer is yes. Question number 2. Okay, fine, we get it. This causes a decrease in testosterone, but by how much, and is this actually a problem? Yet another study, because I know how much you guys love that, effects of dietary fats and fiber on plasma and urine androgens, which is a fancy way of saying, testosterone, specifically male sex hormones, and estrogens, female sex hormones. in men, a controlled feeding study. So what this study did is it took 43 healthy men between the ages of 19 to 56, and it separated them into two randomized groups. They had a low-fat group, but they were getting 19% of their calories from fat, which is pretty darn low. In my opinion, anything under 20% of your calories coming from fat, that's legit low fat. The other group had 41% of their calories coming from fat, which in my opinion is pretty high. Anything over 30 to 35%, that's a high fat diet. Finally, the results show that there was about a 13% increase in testosterone, both in the urine and plasma, aka blood, of the high fat group. To clarify, there are two ways to measure testosterone, total and free testosterone. Usually I recommend to look at both. So the average man will have a total testosterone somewhere between 270 to 1070 nanograms per deciliter, averaging, the majority of the population will probably be somewhere in that 500 to 600 range. Specifically for free testosterone, the average man will probably be somewhere between 9 to 30 nanomoles per liter, probably averaging somewhere around that 20 to 21 mark. This means that a 13% increase in testosterone would take your free testosterone from 20 to 22, 23, and your total testosterone from 500 all the way up to a smashing 565. Question number 3. Okay, we get it. There is an increased testosterone and we do know the numbers. What does that mean? Will this have visible, feelable, is that a word, feelable? Tangible effects on your ability to lose body fat or gain muscle mass? And the answer is no. Once again, guys, you know it, I got it. Here's another scientific study. Testosterone dose-dependent relationships in healthy young men. So they took 61 healthy, young guys between the ages of 18 to 35. They split them up into different groups, and then they pretty much just gave them testosterone, aka they put them on steroids. The actual amount of testosterone they gave them was, it ranges from 25, 50, 125, 300, or so. They gave them significantly, increasing and varying levels of testosterone. The results were as follows. The changes in fat-free mass, aka muscle, were not significant until we got to a fairly high dose. We were talking 125 milligrams of testosterone per week, whereas the first group, the 25 milligrams per week group, actually lost muscle. Does this mean that testosterone is going to make you lose muscle? No, this means that, it's a random fluctuation. It's a random variable. The actual noticeable results in a study have to be past a certain threshold, a threshold of significance, whether it be up or down, for it to be actually significant. So this means it's a fluke. It means that whatever they were doing, in this case 25 milligrams of testosterone, it didn't really have an effect on them. In fact, if you plot the results, you can clearly see a positive correlation between muscle and total testosterone concentration, but there's a problem. Guys, look at the scale. We're dealing in multiples of 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, which is pretty much the entire, healthy average range for the average man's testosterone. This means that our 13% increase, which we were talking about being about, 60 to 70, 65 nanograms worth, on this chart, that would mean a difference of going from here to here. Oh wow, guys, holy crap, quick, get the bacon, get the mayonnaise. I'm gonna down 300 grams of fat and turn to He-Man. Guys, here are the facts. For the average man to actually see visual, tangible increases in his ability to put on muscle mass, he would need to increase his testosterone level to about 20 to 30% at minimum beyond the limits of the natural range. For the average man, this roughly equates to doubling his testosterone levels, which means he has to have an increase of 100%. So the 13% increase in testosterone, which we see from a higher fat diet, it doesn't really matter. Guys, this is why individuals who go on steroids, they increase their testosterone, by doubling it, tripling it, quintupling it, because it's pretty much the principle of go big or go home. These, 10, 20, 25% increases in testosterone, they're not going to have an effect that you can actually physically see or feel. There's just no point to it. In fact, guys, on the other hand, there actually may be some negative repercussions to having a higher fat intake in your diet. Number one is simply the negative health effects. I mean, we're sitting here talking about specifically testosterone, but what about all the other stuff that, comes into play when you have such a high fat diet? Specifically, if you don't actually look at the types of fat you're getting, and you're just loading up on saturated and even trans fat, which is just the worst thing for you. In addition, guys, another problem is that when you are having such a high fat intake as a percentage of your daily calories, assuming you are keeping protein the same, because protein doesn't really fluctuate, protein has to be set to X grams per pound of body weight. So, unless your body weight decreases or increases, protein is pretty much, stagnant. It's pretty much staying the same. So fat goes up, Well, unless you're going to increase your total calories as a whole, which might be a problem because you're going to turn, from a lean bulk to a dirty bulk, you have to bring your carbohydrates down. This is an issue for two reasons. Number one is that carbohydrates are your body's main source of energy. I talked about this in Lean Bulking 101, why I advocate going so high on carbohydrates. Your body uses carbohydrates, turning into glucose or storing it as glycogen, and then using it, using glycogen for heavy, intense, quick workouts, sprinting, training, lifting. That is the number one source of energy for your body. So going high fat forces you to reduce carbohydrates, and reducing carbohydrates may have a negative impact on your ability to train at, your maximum level. And in addition, guys, carbohydrates are very useful for decreasing cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone found throughout your body, and it increases during times of psychological stress, but it also increases during times of physical stress. This is why I really advocate a post-workout meal. Not just for getting protein, that's great, have a scoop of whey or whatever, but don't, this is why protein and water alone, in my opinion, is insufficient. You should also have some carbohydrates in there, throw some fruit, have some juice, or maybe have a legit meal. Go have some chicken, rice, pasta, potatoes, whatever you want to do. This is because the influx of carbohydrates will actually inhibit cortisol levels, which may have, increased after physical stress, such as working out. Cortisol is not a good hormone. It's pretty much the exact opposite we want. It's almost like the anti-testosterone. A lot of people say estrogen is the anti-testosterone. No, in my opinion, it's cortisol. Cortisol, decreases your ability to put on muscle. Cortisol sucks, plain and simple. So guys, that is it. Finally, my overall recommendation. If you are lean bulking, I advocate, having some fat in your diet, but keeping it somewhere between 20 to 25% of your calories coming from fat. However, if you are cutting, I recommend taking your fat pretty much as low as it can possibly go, up to a healthy minimum. What is a healthy minimum? It's about 0.25 grams of fat per pound of body weight. For a 200-pound man, this would be about 50 grams of fat. I myself, I never put it that low. For me, I always kept it around 55 to 60 grams of fat. So maybe go to the minimum and then just add a little bit more. Thus, we have more calories available to put into carbohydrates, better training, lower cortisol. Overall, it's great, and your body's not going to feel any negative effects from low testosterone. That is it. That is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to do a hopefully quick video on this to answer this question once and for all, because I have been hearing this for years, and I want to take this topic and just blow it out of the water and put it to rest. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Leave it a like if you did. Leave it a like if you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video.